Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast, episode 499. Oh my gosh, it's almost episode 500. And you guys must be like, where's Ashley? Because it's been weeks since I posted an episode. Well, ever since I posted the episode about the phototherapy stem cell patches, my phone has been blowing up. It's been amazing. I have talked to so many listeners. I've had so many client calls every single day. My calendar is full of amazing conversations with the listeners and with my clients about the phototherapy patches. I've had at least 30 clients get on the patches, start using them, get on them. The patch using the phototherapy in helping their body address different issues, and outstanding results. Really, really exciting. And I've been pinching myself because it's like, how does something so small have such a profound effect? And that's because it's frequency medicine. Really, really fascinating stuff. Definitely you're going to want to go back and listen to the episode I did recently about phototherapy stem cell patches with Trina Hammock. And if you want to have a phone call with me, a free phone call, go to learntruehealth.com. And in the menu, it says Work with Ashley James. Click on that. And then the first option there is to sign up for a free phone call with me where we can discuss the stem cell phototherapy patches, and if there's anything else that I can help you with, and send resources to you, answer questions, please jump on a phone call with me. I'd love to help you. Some amazing results that we've seen. I had one client, and I'm sure she's listening, so hello, but I had one client who all of her crazy symptoms that she's been experiencing the last 6 years, she's been suffering horribly from weird symptoms that no one knew what they were from. And in about a week, using the patches and correcting her polarity, and we talk about this in the episode, but we corrected her polarity, and she just was so excited that all of her symptoms went away, and she just was just beyond excited. And I'm beyond excited for her. Can you imagine feeling like dizzy and out of it and just having all these really weird symptoms for 6 years, not knowing what's going on? No one knows what's going on. And then we use a frequency, very gentle and yet powerful frequency medicine. When I say gentle, it can be used on babies. It can be used on animals with success, with great success. So it's gentle for everyone, for animals, humans, no matter what size we are or what age we are. And it doesn't disrupt medications. So there's no contraindication like medications or anything like that. We're just seeing fantastic results. I have personally had some amazing experiences. I have a family member who's now her benign tremors. And now she doesn't have Parkinson's. She's had a battery of tests several times by neurologists. They don't know what's causing them. But she has tremors so bad she couldn't hold the newspaper and read it. She can't drink. You can't eat soup because it just would all go everywhere. Her hands and arms would just shake uncontrollably. She's had that for a few years. Tried a bunch of things. We started patching her a few months ago, and she's had great success with a lot of stuff correcting. Better sleep, better energy, far less pain, happier mood, better digestion. Just everything is getting better and better. And then about three and a half months into patching, she started noticing that her shakes were diminishing. And just the other day, she was able to hold the newspaper and read it. Just a dream come true. She thought she'd never be able to do that again. Her handwriting is improved, and she used to do calligraphy, and she hasn't been able to do anything for years with her hands. So the freedom this is giving people. And what's cool about the phototherapy patches is it complements so many other modalities. Like it complements taking your supplements and taking herbs and eating healthy and exercising. It doesn't add anything to the body. It asks the body, it puts a frequency in the body that asks the body to perform a healthy task more. So the glutathione patch increases glutathione by 300% in 24 hours. Within moments of putting on the stem cell patch, people's pain diminishes, sometimes goes away completely, and their inflammation goes down. They're turning on thousands of dormant gene expression. So this is an epigenetic thing, turning on healing genes to help the body in amazing ways. So a lot of people who start using the patches to support one thing end up seeing a bunch of other things improve. And then just for the first aid benefits, I got kicked in the face really, really hard the other day by accident. My son, who has been doing Taekwondo for a long time, is a really good kicker, and he was kicking the blankets off of him at full force as I was coming in to wake him up in the morning, and he didn't know I was there. And boom, I got kicked in the face so bad, my head spun, bleeding nose right away. I had all the concussion symptoms, and it was really scary. For a minute there, it was pretty scary. I immediately took one of the patches that's designed for first aid use, put it on my nose. The bleeding stopped, inflammation stopped, the swelling stopped. I thought that was so cool. I put the patch for inflammation on the back of my neck. I put the stem cell patch lower down in my spine. And then for the rest of the day, I was using the protocol, the patches around my head, which you put inside a hat so you can take it on and off. It's pretty cool to do that. And I used the protocol for concussions. And then that night I went to bed with it's a special protocol called Brain Balancer, and 5 of my favorite patches, the ones that decrease inflammation. They do a bunch of other things, but it feels so good. This is my favorite patch. And it's funny because my mom friends, whenever I give them this patch, they go, this patch makes me not yell at my kids, because it just makes people calmer, happier, puts people in a better mood, because it actually helps balance dopamine in the brain and bring down inflammation. So you just feel like you can handle more stress without getting frazzled. Well, I put 5 of these on my head and went to bed that night. And the next morning I woke up and 100% of my concussion was gone. I was back to my brain was back to my normal self. How cool is that? Now, I've seen testimonials. We have a secret Facebook group. It's a wonderful Facebook group of practitioners. It's like a team of practitioners that I've been learning from and working with, and all of their clients. And even though it feels like an intimate community, it's actually close to 55,000 people. But it's a secret group. So if you want in the group, let me know. You gotta email me or book a session with me, book a free session with me. I'll get you in this group. And in this group, people share their testimonials. They share their protocols. They share the testimonials. And I see in this group people who've had major brain damage, really, really bad concussions, where 8 months later, they're still in the fog. They're still suffering hugely. They start using the patches for balancing their brain and just supporting healthy brain function. And within 10 minutes, they start feeling the fog lift. They start feeling the brain just coming back into balance. There's studies. They actually have 100 studies on these patches. And there's studies showing that we're reversing early stage dementia. So many benefits around the neurology. But it also helps with fertility, hormone balancing, sleep, 66% deeper sleep. They did studies on this. The list goes on and on. Addiction behaviors, thyroid. Thyroid is actually the easiest thing to support the body's ability to fix. We're supporting the body's ability to help itself become healthier. I have seen so many people reverse their hypothyroidism to support their body's ability and their thyroid's ability to come back online, produce healthy new thyroid tissue in weeks. It's so exciting what we can do for the body. There's testimonials of people with heart damage and heart disease that are reversing that too. So anyway, the list goes on and on. It's very, very exciting. So if you're wondering, where has Ashley been? It's because I have been busy every day, 7 days a week, or weeks and weeks and weeks, ever since I published that episode, chatting with amazing listeners and clients and helping everyone get on the phototherapy protocols. So if you want to try it too, I'd love to help you. This has been amazing, the things we're helping people with. I feel like out of everything I've ever discovered in the last 12 years, everything I've ever discovered, this is the coolest, most effective, most versatile health tool. If you're frustrated and you're like, I just wish I could get on the other side of health. If you've hit a wall, if you've done. Now the thing is, eating healthy is really important. Moving your body in a way that brings you joy is really important. There's so many things that are really important to your health. And we have to make sure we cover all the foundations, right? You can't outpatch a bad diet. You can't take phototherapy patches and handle a nutrient deficiency, right? So we got to make sure we eat healthy, move our bodies, drink lots. We have to hydrate. But if you do all that, if you do all the fundamentals and you're still frustrated with not getting on the other side of a health issue, you should absolutely give the phototherapy patches a try. Absolutely. You want to come join that Facebook group. And if you don't do Facebook, you really want to talk to me, and I'll hook you up with the protocols. The protocols, it supercharges your results because we're utilizing acupuncture points in addition to the phototherapy. So we're putting the patches on acupuncture points and we're seeing outstanding results. So yeah, go to learntourhealth.com, then in the menu, see Work with Ashley James, and book your free conversation with me, and I'd love to help you. Now, let's finally get to today's episode. Now that you know what I've been up to the last few weeks, I had a birthday, by the way. I'm 43 now, which is, I know you, everyone who after the age of about 35, birthdays are kind of surreal. You're like, I remember my parents at this age and they seemed really old. I totally do. I totally remember my parents in their 40s. I thought 40 was really old, and I'm like, 40 is not really old. Maybe 90 is old. That's I got to change my mindset. 90's old, 40's young. So this episode's wonderful. I love Dr. William Davis. He has been on the show before, and twice actually. So this is his third time. And he shares with us some amazing stuff he's been up to since his last episode with us. We talked about Lactobacillus reuteri about a year ago, and it had a profound effect on one of my family members. Really, really, really helped them to get on the other side of a major health issue. It also helped me to overcome the daily post-traumatic stress, panic attacks that I was having as a result of still being in grief from losing my daughter. And when I started eating it, the day I started eating the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt that he teaches us, he talks about how to make it in the last episode. The day I started eating it is the day the daily outbursts of crying and sobbing uncontrollably stopped. And it's so cool that it had such a quick effect. And it felt within 3 days of eating that yogurt, I felt like I was, and I've never been on antidepressants, but it felt like what I imagined being on antidepressants would be like if they worked. It just felt like the cloud had lifted in my spirit, and I felt like there was a chance at joy. There was a chance at happiness. And that was such an interesting experience to have such a strong feeling of emotional response to a gut healing food, right? Because we know serotonin's made in the gut. We know that the nerve that runs from the gut to the brain, that there's this connection, right? So, and we know that there's neurotransmitters made in the gut, and that there's a huge connection between gut health and brain health and emotional health. I felt it so profoundly, so quickly. So having Dr. William Davis back on the show today, we discuss, he figured out how to develop a supplement that you can take. This is for people who don't want to go through the hassle of making the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, and it is hassle, okay? You have to get a special Instant Pot, or you have to get a special yogurt maker that holds things at 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 36 hours. You have to sterilize your equipment. You have to get either organic dairy, or you have to, I like making it with cashews. I've experimented with making it with soy, making it with coconut, making it with cashews. Cashews seem to work really well. And then you have to make it and mix it together and blend it. You have to have a high power blender like a Vitamix. So there's so many steps to doing it. And now I make this stuff every 2 weeks for the last year. So I'm used to it. But if it is definitely time consuming, and you have to have all that equipment. So for some people who are traveling, or they just know they want the benefits, but they do not want to have to go through all that, then he figured out how to isolate and make a beautiful supplement. They call it Gut to Glow. And at first I thought it was a skin supplement or like a skin, like a cream, a gut to glow. But what it is actually is it's a wonderful Lactobacillus reuteri supplement that it helps the gut, but also there's anti-aging benefits. Women see, and not only men, you can do it too, but women see that their skin looks much younger because it increases collagen production, and that's something we talked about in this episode and also in the previous one about Lactobacillus reuteri. One of its benefits is it increases collagen production in the body, or it stimulates that to happen. So we do talk a lot about gut health in this episode, but we also talk about his supplement. So if you'd like to try his supplement, go to learntruehealth.com/glow. That's learntruehealth.com/glow. And he gave us 2 coupon codes. One is a 10% off for your first order, and that's LTH10. That's LTH10. And then if you ever want to get on auto ship to order it monthly, he gives 15% off to our listeners for the subscription, and that's LTH15, LTH15. So go to learntruehealth.com/glow to check out his supplement and enjoy today's episode. Dr. William Davis is amazing. I have really, really, really enjoyed his work. I love his books. They're so informative. And he's so generous with his information, and he just has a really caring spirit. He wants to help people get healthy. So yeah, he filled this entire episode with wonderful tidbits of health information. So enjoy today's episode. And if you have any questions for me about all the cool things I do, if you want to be one of my clients, I'd love to work with you. If you'd like to get on the phototherapy patches, any of that, go to learntruehealth.com, click on in the menu, work with Ashley James, sign up for a free session to chat. And yeah, let's chat. I love it. All right. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your day and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 499. I am so excited for today's guest. We have back on the show Dr. William Davis, who's one of my heroes. So it's just so wonderful to have you back. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Davis was in episode 167 where we talked about his book, Wheat Belly, which really was so cathartic for me because I went, my whole family went gluten-free 12 years ago. It made such a massive difference in our lives. And it was so big, but everyone around us was just laughing at us and telling us we were crazy. And then when we read your book, because it was right around then we discovered your book, and it was like, oh, this finally there's more validation for us that what we're doing is the right thing. And look at, there's so much science behind it. And now, of course, everyone's heard of being gluten-free, but back 12 years ago, it was still so unheard of. It makes such a big difference to remove something in the body that is inflaming the gut, and it just affects everything because the inflammation in the gut cascades to affecting our neurotransmitters, affecting our brain, and affecting how we think, how we feel, how we behave. It really does cascade into our whole life. And so for those who've never tried going gluten-free, I'd suggest at least 30 days of no barley, wheat, rye, and oats, and just see how you feel. But the takeaway I loved from that episode, Dr. Davis, was teaching us that we could use a glucometer, even those who are not diabetic, use a glucometer to monitor how our body responds to our foods to keep our blood sugar always within those really good ranges, and then let that be your guide to choosing really good healthy meals. So there were so many great takeaways from episode 167. And then we had you on again just a year ago, episode 476, about the Lactobacillus reuteri and your most recent book about healing the gut. And that was amazing. My listeners have been raving about that the last year. We have a Facebook group community where we all make that yogurt together. And since my whole family actually is allergic to dairy, so I've been experimenting with all the different plant-based ways I could possibly make the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt. And I have perfected, because I've made over 30 batches in the last year. I've perfected making it with cashews. I tried soy, I tried coconut, and cashews. It's delicious. And so I have that recipe I can share in the show notes of this episode, and also it's in the Facebook group. And before we jump into today's episode, which I'm really excited to hear what's happened in the last year for you and everything you've been doing. You've been producing something really exciting for the listeners. I know they're going to love it. But I have to share with you something that your episode with us a year ago had two huge impacts on my life. And that is when I interviewed you, and I don't think you knew this at the time, but I was, and actually I didn't even realize what was going on until I talked to a psychologist friend of mine. I was having post-traumatic stress, panic PTSD attacks, after I was still recovering after losing my daughter. And when I interviewed you, I was breaking down crying every day. And I'm a very positive person. I'm a very the opposite of depression. I'm just always happy. I'm just always that's my normal personality. So to break down crying every day, a little something would happen. The glass would fall over and spill, and I would just melt into a puddle. And I had no idea what was going on. And I was really not functioning in my life like I thought I should be. And then I did the interview with you about the Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt, and I was so excited. I immediately ordered all the supplies, and within days I was making it. And I made it with soy because that was the only thing I had in the house. I had an open thing of soy milk, and it was, I do not recommend making the Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt with soy milk. It was not delicious. But I drank it or ate it. However, it was curdled, so it wasn't that great. But I took it in. And that day, I felt something shifting in me. And the daily breakdowns of crying stopped. And 3 days later of being on it, my friend who's a counselor was talking to me, and she said, how are you doing? I said, well, I'm not on drugs, and I've never been on antidepressants, but I said, I feel like I'm on an antidepressant. I am feeling like all that like the sadness is lifting. I'm just feeling like a new person. That Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt was such a game changer for me.
Wow, Ashley, that's great.
It was so huge, and the PTSD attacks stopped, and now those big attacks stopped. And what I've had since are like maybe just little tiny events where I might feel like I'm overwhelmed, or I might just feel like I just need to just take a breather and just do a little grounding and just calm my nervous system, but totally manageable. And it went from unmanageable to manageable with the Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt. And we go into great detail as to how it affects the body. It increases serotonin. That's episode 476 for those that want to go back and listen to all the benefits of the Lactobacillus Reuteri. And also I recommend getting every single one of Dr. William Davis's books. They're all incredible. And you've also now have the gut healing one on audio. That came out last year. So that's fantastic. But here's the second story, because I told you there's two. I have a very close family member who for years suffered from such bad chronic diarrhea, they could not leave the house most days. They go through cycles where it was so bad they couldn't make it from the living room to the bathroom. They would have an accident along the way. And there'd be times when they did have to leave the house that their pants were just stained with diarrhea. And it's so sad for this person, right, to have that level of intensity. Now, they tried everything. They went to all kinds of doctors, and they eliminated some foods, and nothing really worked. And I actually gave this person a batch of the Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt that you taught us to make, but I made it plant-based because I was like, oh, it's delicious. It's cashew yogurt. They'll like it anyway for breakfast. It tastes amazing. And so it's wonderful. It's tart. It's as creamy. And I thought, okay, well, this person would benefit from maybe the sleep. It helps with sleep. And this person was not sleeping well. I thought, okay, it's going to help them with sleep. It also has been known to help people lift that depression. And this person was going through some stuff and not feeling great emotionally. So I was thinking about those benefits. 3 days into eating it, they call me and say, I need another batch. I never want to run out of this stuff. My diarrhea is gone.
Oh, wow.
It has been almost a year since because I was, maybe it's been about 9 months since I gave it to them. And I have been supplying them for the last about 9 months. Every 2 weeks, I make that person a big batch that last 2 weeks. And of course, I'm making a big batch, actually, I make a huge batch, and we all eat it. But yeah, it's they don't want to be without it, because this is the only thing. There's been no pharmaceutical that has stopped the diarrhea. There's been no food change that stopped the diarrhea. The only thing that's ever worked has been this. So it's given this person their life back. Now they're doing up to 3 exercise classes a week,
Hmm.
and they're able to go and just be so much more productive. So you've changed my life, you've changed their life. I know you've changed thousands of lives. I just really want to thank you. And there's been a lot of listeners who are making in our community, who are making the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, and sharing about it in the Learn to Your Health Facebook group. So we're having a lot of fun with everything we've learned from you. So I just
That's great,
I
Ashley.
thank you. I appreciate you, and I just can't wait to hear what have you been doing the last year? What's since we had you on the show? What's been going on in your world?
Those are some pretty incredible stories.
Right?
You can see why I get so excited about this, that just restoring this microbe that virtually all of us have lost, that is
Mm-hmm.
this microbe that's carried by all other mammals. Squirrels have it, dogs have it, uh, camels have it, but we've lost it. Indigenous humans have it, people not exposed to antibiotics and chlorinated drinking water, et cetera, glyphosate. They all have this microbe, and we've lost it. And these wonderful experiences we're all having, like ones you described for yourself and your friend, as well as other things people are experiencing, reflects just how necessary this microbe was. But the thing that gets me really excited are the social effects of Reuteri. That is, so we boost oxytocin, the hormone oxytocin, if we believe the animal evidence that came out of MIT.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, we've tried to reduce that evidence. We're having a hard time with measuring oxytocin. Measuring oxytocin has been, for decades, a very difficult thing to do, and we're struggling to do it also. So we haven't yet corroborated in humans. But if we believe the animal data from MIT and some other places, that Reuteri tells your brain to release more oxytocin, the hormone of love and empathy. And so what people are experiencing, as you have experienced, are emotional and social effects, but
Mm-hmm.
mostly an increase the intensity of love and affection, generosity, and my favorite, an acceptance of other people's opinions. Now, when you think about that, Ashley, this is all occurring at a time when we've lost that microbe. Almost all of us have lost that microbe, and
Mm.
thereby presumptively the ability to provoke oxytocin release at a time when we're witnessing record social isolation. Even
Mm.
pre-pandemic, this was true. So record social isolation, record suicide, even true pre-pandemic, divorce, shootings, political discord. Humans have always been evil to each other. There's no question about that. But doesn't it seem to think things have gotten worse? Now, that's hard to prove, except that people who get the Reuteri restored, as you and your friend have and your followers have, will tell you, yeah, you know what? My relationship is better. My husband, who doesn't like to talk to me, I had this one woman come on and say, my husband's normally not a guy who expresses his emotions very clearly. One time I was sitting across from him and he says, you know what? I like you. I've always liked you, but I like you more now. Come here, sit next to me. So little things like that. Or people say, I'm in line for coffee at Starbucks and I find myself introducing myself to strangers. In other words, these little things in social interaction, I'm seeing it change. People are getting rid of depressive thoughts, suicidal thoughts. I'm not suggesting there's a cure for everything, but I think we've pushed the needle a little bit towards better social behavior, better connection to other humans. And I think that's the most, yeah, there's going to be better skin, muscle, libido, sleep, etc. But the thing that really excites me is the change in the social fabric.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talked in episode 476, what they were seeing in the animal studies was that when we have the correct amount of Lactobacillus reuteri in our gut, that our body is producing, is it collagen? Our body produces more collagen?
Well, once again, if we believe the mouse studies and the limited human evidence,
Mm-hmm.
and some of our own evidence too, by the way, in our first human clinical trial, There's an increase in collagen in skin in the dermal layer, the dermis. So in our clinical trial, we did something called high resolution skin ultrasound to measure the thickness of the dermis, and we got a 14.5% increase in dermal thickness over 3 months. Now
Wow.
that's with a product. That's not just with Reuteri.
Hmm.
These studies are very difficult and very expensive to perform. So we can only do limited numbers of people. But with a combination of Reuteri and some other things, we do get an increase in dermal thickness, consistent with what they saw in the mouse studies and the limited human evidence. So in the mouse studies, there was a huge increase in dermal collagen, increase in dermal thickness, and thereby loss of wrinkles.
Hmm.
And they did take ladies, remarkably, they had volunteers submit to puncture wounds in the forearm, which is kind of tough to persuade somebody to accept a puncture wound. But these ladies did that. And while healing time in mice is accelerated dramatically, cuts healing time by 50%, so much faster healing. In human, it was more like 35%, but still quite substantial. Because if you think about that, if this holds true in future trials, there might be a way to accelerate, say, incisions after surgery,
Hmm.
or burns, or injury. We can accelerate healing time. That's something I'd like to see explored over time.
Well, if we can speed up healing time of the skin, that also decreases the chances of getting an infection, right? Because once that skin is healed, there's less. It's when the wound is open, right? That's when we're more susceptible to infection, especially for like you said with burn patients. But if we could take something like a salve that speeds up healing time by 35%, I mean that's worth it. That's worth it. That's gonna help prevent infections.
And it gets even better because in those animal studies, we have to be careful when we extrapolate from animals. But so far, Ashley, everything that's been in this instance, where we're talking about Reuteri and oxytocin, so far the pieces that have been examined in humans have proven true. That is, what was seen in mice has held true. We need to explore more, but so far, many of the observations made in animals have also held true in humans.
Hmm.
One of the things not yet corroborated in humans, though, was the huge improvement in the immune response in these mice,
Mm.
both in wounds as well as systemically. So one of the things that happened in the mouse study, so there's something called thymic involution. And all that means is the thymus gland, which is right in front of the heart underneath your sternum, reaches its maximum size and capacity to produce T lymphocytes, T cells, that protect you from infections, including viral infections. It reaches its maximal size and T cell productivity at age 15.
Oh.
And then for every year after that, it shrinks, such that by age 70, it's only 10% of its original size and capacity to mount an immune response. And this is, of course, a big part of the reason why you can die of the flu at age 72, but not at age 18. So,
Mm.
well, when they gave elderly mice Reuteri, they watched the thymus gland restored to its youthful size. So reversal of thymic involution. That'd be very different. It's a tough study to reproduce in humans. I thought we could try that, but we don't have the budget for that. But I'm hoping somebody does that study to show that you can revert. Because when you have a thymus that's restored to youthful capacity, you're protected from things like pneumococcal pneumonia, flu, cancer, because T cells are responsible for the process of immunosurveillance, that is, looking for cells that have mutations in them that
Hmm.
lead to uncontrolled growth, cancer, in other words.
Hmm.
So that would be, so the whole Reuteri oxytocin thing is going to be the subject of a lot of examination and studies in coming years because it is so exciting.
Now, for those that haven't listened to episode 476, I think a really important point to understand is that as humans, we're supposed to have Lactobacillus reuteri, and we're all walking around without it. It's like it's like we're supposed to have three arms and we're all walking around with two arms, right? And we all think we're supposed to have two arms, but we actually have been all missing an arm. And it's so important. And it's been wiped out because of, if you've had one, like you said in our last interviews, if you have one course of antibiotics, it's wiped out. It's passed on through breast milk. So if you were bottle fed, if your mother or grandmother or even yourself as a child had antibiotics, even like you said, glyphosate, drinking tap water with chlorine, all kinds of ways we can kill it. It's quite sensitive as a as good gut bacteria goes. But we're walking around as a species largely missing this piece to the pie, to the piece to the puzzle, right? And this is we're walking around missing part of ourselves. Because what we understand now about the gut, and maybe you can talk a bit about this, is that we're just beginning to really understand the microbiome. And we thought, okay, the microbiome is gut that live. It's about 6 pounds, right? Give or take, about 6 pounds of bacteria that live inside our gut. But it's also all over our body now. It's in our skin, that there's a microbiome surrounding our whole body, that we're actually, like, cell to cell, we're more bacteria than we are human. And that these bacteria in our cells help to digest our food and assimilate certain nutrients for us. And that if we were completely sterile and had none of this bacteria, we could not survive. It would not be a healthy lifestyle. And that we need it, but we need it for all over our body.
You're absolutely right, Ashley. I cringe to think how little we knew before we started thinking about the microbiome. One of I have a new granddaughter, about 9 months old now, and I watched the baby's mom go through prenatal care and then delivery and early childhood, early infancy. And I saw all the things that she was not told. And this is a girl who comes from a wealthy family, has no shortage of resources, and yet she was told virtually nothing. Though she did get 5 courses of antibiotics during the third trimester and after delivery. So I had to educate them. For instance, if a woman has vaginal dysbiosis, that is a disruption of the microbial composition of the vaginal canal, which, by the way, is at least a third of the entire female population on this planet. And the vaginal microbiome is much more definable than the gastrointestinal microbiome. It's much simpler. And the vaginal microbiome is meant to be dominated by specific Lactobacillus species, specifically Lactobacillus crispatus. Well, if a woman lacks that microbe and allows proliferation, which is very common, of species like Gardnerella or Adipobium, you have problems. You're more prone to vaginal infections like Candida infections, and you're more likely to have a miscarriage during
Wow.
pregnancy, and you're more likely to prematurely deliver your child. Because when you have that vaginal dysbiosis, it's inflammatory and it inflames the cervix. And the cervix tends to relax prematurely. And as you know, if you deliver a child, say, at 30 weeks, that's a catastrophe. That child's going to be in the ICU. It's prone to necrotizing enterocolitis, to psychological, immunological, and social deficits, learning impairments. So why not correct vaginal dysbiosis? It's easy to do. So I saw many things not being done. We may have touched in the past on this idea that a very specific species, Bifidobacteria infantis, has been lost by moms and is often not passed on to the baby. So it's meant to be passed on at birth, vaginal birth, and then also through breastfeeding. And if the baby does not get that microbe, it does not grow as well as it should. Neurological growth is impaired. The baby's more likely to not sleep well, have more regurgitation of breast milk or formula. It has more bowel movements, more diaper change from mom and dad, and has more health problems, more prone to diabetes, obesity, asthma. But if you restore infantis to that child, especially if the mom is breastfeeding, because Bifidobacteria infantis allows the child to metabolize what are called human milk oligosaccharides, or HMOs. So that baby has accelerated neurological maturation, has better immune response, has 50% fewer bowel movements, thereby 50% fewer diaper changes, is more likely to sleep through the night, less asthma, less type 2 diabetes, less obesity, and has a higher IQ. That's how important getting the microbiome can be.
Oh my gosh, you probably just, all the moms listening just perked up. Now, if our kid's already born and they have some of those conditions, what can we do to help them now? Like, should we be giving them, obviously, like, we could give them the Lactobacillus reuteri, but yogurt, but is there a specific yogurt we could make for them, or could we ferment something for them to help with those things once they're born?
Well, you raised a very important issue earlier, and that is, and this is kind of hard for a lot of people to get their arms around. I try to encourage people to get away from the idea of treating things. That's what they do in medicine, right? They treat high blood sugar, they treat high blood pressure, never once asking why that condition emerged in the first place and what we can do to correct the whole situation. So what I do is I encourage people to get away from this idea of treating things. You know, if you treat somebody's high blood sugar with drugs, that person's still going to have heart disease, stroke, kidney failure, blindness, amputations, gastroparesis, etc. So what if instead we address the factors that allowed those conditions to emerge in the first place, regardless of the label, regardless of whether the label was asthma, hypertension, coronary disease, cognitive impairment, rosacea, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, type 2 diabetes. Let's address the factors that allow those conditions to emerge in the first place. So we got to go back to the old conversation. We do wheat and grain and sugar elimination because that's, as you've experienced yourself, the underlying cause for so many health problems, despite being pushed on us by government agencies and dietitians and doctors. So getting rid of this thing that never belonged in the human diet in the first place, correct common nutrient deficiencies unique to modern life, not to the diet, but to modern life, like magnesium, for instance. We're supposed to get magnesium by drinking water from rivers and streams. Well, you can't do that. It's got sewage. It's got farm runoff.
Especially now, gosh, with Ohio.
Yes, right.
That and all the all that runoff, the water from Ohio. And if the listeners may not have known, but there was a massive chemical spill, and my friends just across Lake Erie in Canada were telling me for a week they could taste the metals, or taste the chemicals, smell it, even indoors they could taste it and smell it. This was, and now they're saying, oh, the air is safe to breathe. The water and the soil are all safe. Everything's safe. But my friends, 200, even 400 miles away, are saying, I can taste this. I can smell this. This is ridiculous for days. And all the runoff, if you look at the streams from that area in Ohio, that runs off into that basin, runs off into then what's in the Mississippi. And that goes out into the Gulf of Mexico, and there's our fishing, our shrimp. If you're going to be eating seafood next year, it's going to have those chemicals. And I'm kind of terrified of what is this going to be like Minamata, Japan back in the 1930s, where the children are born with multiple arms, multiple eyes, and it takes them 20, 30 years till they figure out that it was the mercury poisoning the down the stream from all the factories dumping the mercury. This is just like another disaster I feel like they're covering up. We have to be very careful with the water we're drinking. It is tainted. Right. We can't go, like you said, we can't go and get our minerals just from drinking clean spring water, because there's no such thing as clean spring water anymore. There's 80,000 man-made chemicals. Since I was born, 80,000 man-made chemicals are now in our air, food, water, soil. It's a prolific. And they say here in Seattle that we detect mercury from the ashes that are falling on us from the coal mines and the factories and the energy factories in China. So this isn't just, oh well, I'm here in this state, or I'm here in this province and it's pretty clean here. No, we're affected by what everyone puts in the air. And this isn't for me, this isn't a political thing. I don't care what political affiliation you have. We can all agree on one thing: pollution's bad for us. Let's not even talk about global warming, because then people get into politicizing it. Let's all agree on one thing: pollution's bad. And no one wants to drink the water after the water from Ohio after the accident just recently. So the point is, pollution is very dangerous and bad for us, and it's killing the microbiome of the soil in of our bodies, right? And we can't get the nutrients like you said. I know I went off on a tangent. You were talking about the one of the most important minerals of the body, which is magnesium. It's used in over 1,800 enzymatic processes in the body. It's incredibly important, but we can't get it from nature anymore because of the pollution. So I went off on my tangent, but I think it's relevant because we have to we can't be naive. We have to take the wool off our eyes and realize that our lives are under constant stress of the pollution that's around us, and that stress is killing the microbiome of the body. So we have to be proactive in supporting the microbiome of our body because it's under constant stress from everything around us. Okay, back to you. Sorry, I just
Okay.
you touched. I got on my soapbox. Okay, I'm getting off.
Yeah, but I couldn't agree more. Actually, you are absolutely right. It's a scary world out there. But with this idea of rather than treating things, we're going to address the factors that allow disease to emerge. And so there's four that are really common. There's more than four, but the four that play big roles, and they're just magnesium, iodine, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamin D. Now, the great thing is you combine those four and also throw in the diet, and you reverse this very fundamental processes of insulin resistance and inflammation. Those are the processes that lead to obesity, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, etc. So you've addressed a whole wide swath of human disease just by doing that. Now, as you know, we also go into the microbiome, the gastrointestinal microbiome, because what's happened with a lot of people is overexposure to antibiotics, to toxic heavy metals, to industrial compounds, to chlorinated drinking water, to other prescription drugs like stomach acid blocking drugs, statin cholesterol drugs, anti-inflammatory drugs, food additives like preservatives that kill microbes in food and in you, food additives that disrupt the mucus barrier in the intestine. The mucus barrier is very important, and there are many food additives that disrupt the mucus barrier, like the mixing agents like polysorbate 80 in ice cream. And so this onslaught of things that disrupt the human microbiome, among the effects is that we've lost literally hundreds of healthy species that were doing good things for us. And one of the effects that I don't think is being talked about enough, that we have to start talking a lot more about, when you lose those healthy microbes kept unhealthy microbes at bay, kept them suppressed. And so when you lose those healthy microbes, those unhealthy microbes, mostly fecal microbes, like E. coli and Salmonella and Campylobacter, which many people recognize those microbes because those are also the microbes of food poisoning. So these microbes proliferate, and then they do something extraordinary. They ascend into the 24 feet of the small intestine. And the small intestine is not well adapted to having fecal microbes. It has a thin, fragile mucus layer protecting itself. Unlike the colon, where microbes are supposed to be, that has a two-layer, much thicker mucus barrier. So fecal microbes make their way into the 24 feet of small intestine. When they die, they only live for a few hours. When they die, trillions of these microbes shed their byproducts, but specifically one that's really bad called endotoxin. And this endotoxin is thereby able to penetrate through the mucus barrier, through the intestinal wall, and gain entrance to the bloodstream. And when endotoxin enters the bloodstream, it's called endotoxemia. But that is the crucial process, actually, that explains to us now, and this has been corroborated numerous times in clinical studies. Now we understand how microbes in the gastrointestinal tract can be experienced as depression in the brain, or Parkinson's disease, or Lou Gehrig's disease, or Alzheimer's dementia, or as muscle and joint aches of fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis, or as skin conditions like rosacea or psoriasis, or metabolic conditions like fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. In other words, we now understand that microbes in the GI tract play a role in virtually all common chronic modern diseases.
How would we know if we're over toxic with endotoxemia? Like, how would we know that we have endotoxemia? You mentioned a bunch of different things, but if someone's like, "Gee, I wonder if my depression's endotoxemia," like, would you say go for a lab test, or are there easier ways of telling?
So there's a number of ways. One way is to look for what I call telltale signs. Telltale signs would be food intolerances. If you say, I can't eat eggplant or other nightshades, or histamine-containing foods like cheese or wine, or FODMAPs, fibers and sugars, or legumes, or nuts. So almost, maybe not 100%, but close to 100% of food intolerance, all these things modern people are experiencing that your grandmother did not, those are all from this process. So it's called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, and that's the process that causes a high level of endotoxemia. So if you have any food intolerance, blame SIBO. If you have fat malabsorption, you see fat droplets in the toilet, that's a very high likelihood of SIBO and endotoxemia. If you have certain conditions that are virtually synonymous with SIBO and endotoxemia, such as restless leg syndrome, fibromyalgia, very high likelihood, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, very high likelihood, inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, celiac disease, an autoimmune or neurodegenerative condition, very high likelihood, fatty liver, very high likelihood. And you know what I did actually? At first I thought this was a rare process until I did two things. One is there's a consumer device now. It's called the AIRE device, AIRE, came out in 2018, invented by a PhD engineer in Dublin, Ireland, because his wife had irritable bowel syndrome, and she was told to go on a low FODMAPs diet, because when you limit fibers and sugars in a person with IBS, they have less bloating and diarrhea. Well, he saw how often she got tripped up and got exposed to something fibers or sugars and had bloating and diarrhea, etc. So he invented this device to detect hydrogen gas on the breath, because that's produced by microbes when they are fed fibers and sugars. Well, I got a hold of this thing. I called him. I said, Angus, that's not really what this thing is. This is a mapping device to tell you where microbes are living in the gastrointestinal tract. There's a specific way to use it based on timing. And so that's on my Super Gut book. It's on my website, drdavisinfinitehealth.com, how to use the AIRE device. It's about $150 to $200, so it's not cheap, but it's far cheaper than, there is a test you can do in a lab or clinic using a similar technology. I actually think the AIRE device is superior to the lab or clinic version, because you're blowing directly into the hydrogen gas detector with the AIRE device. When you do this in a clinic or lab, you blow breath into a vial. And you're trying to capture hydrogen gas, which is the smallest molecule there is. It's very easy to escape. So I think the AIRE device is actually superior. But I started having people test for hydrogen gas using this timing issue. So what you do, you get a baseline level, 0 to 10, and you're looking for a rise of 4 units. So you get a baseline level, let's say it's 1.2. You eat something that microbes eat, like inulin powder is a good one. It's a prebiotic fiber, and put it in your coffee, say. Drink your coffee with inulin, and then test every 30 to 45 minutes. And if you have a rise, let's say at 45 minutes it's 9.8, that you have microbes way high up in your GI tract, because producing hydrogen gas is normal from the colon, but the colon is 24 feet down or more from your mouth. It can't make that 24 feet in 90 minutes. So, or 45 minutes. So any positive reading before 90 minutes, you know microbes are living in the upper GI tract. After 90 minutes, we can't tell the difference between distal small bowel disruption of microbes and colonic microbes. But so doing this test and having a lot of people do it, I was shocked. It was the exception who tested negative. People were testing positive left and right. So I went back to the scientific literature and asked this question. Of all the studies where they took some condition and asked what proportion of people with this condition test positive for SIBO. So one easy example is fatty liver. So in the US, with 330 million people, we know that 50% of the US, 50%, shocking, have fatty liver and on their way to cirrhosis. Well, based on the published science, 50% of the people with fatty liver have test positive for SIBO. So if there's 330 million people, half have fatty liver, that's 160 million or so. Half have SIBO, that's 80 million people there alone.
That's huge.
How about irritable bowel syndrome? We know there's 60 to 70 million people in the US with irritable bowel syndrome. What proportion test positive for SIBO? It varies from study to study, but it's around 40%. Well, 40%, another 24 million people. Add up all those other conditions, obesity, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, neurodegenerative, and you have well over 150 million people. There's some overlap, of course. How about an obese type 2 diabetic with fatty liver? So there's going to be some overlap. So it's not an exact number, but you can see you can get to very high numbers very quickly. And it's the bottom line, it is not rare. It is in fact very common by my estimates, probably somewhere around 1 in 2 people, 50%.
When we look at labs, there are these ranges that say sort of like, this is the range that's normal. And I question normal, especially hearing what you've just shared, because normal doesn't really indicate healthy. Like, okay, we understand healthy ranges, but naturopathic physicians will look at labs a lot differently than how MDs have been taught in school. And it's interesting because there's normal, which is like, okay, so what's the average population? The average population is in this range, right? Well, I don't want to be part of the average population, especially if most of the population has endotoxemia. And then in the naturopathic realm, they typically look at, well, what is optimal in when they're looking at lab ranges. They're looking for how can we get you to be absolutely in the optimal range? It doesn't sound like there's optimal is common among Americans. We're talking about Americans, but many other countries are catching up with America in terms of our disease state. 70% of adult Americans are on at least one prescription medication. So we just have a very sick nation. We as a nation, we spend the absolute most on health, and I laugh calling it healthcare because it's disease management. Of course, you wrote a book about this, about how the medical system is failing us, and we have to learn, and that's why we're here. We're learning from you so that we can take charge of our health. But this idea that walking around seeing the population, if most of the population is so sick, has endotoxemia, right? That is not how we want to be. We have to be the salmon. We kind of have to be the black sheep. We have to make decisions to go against the norm in order to have optimal health. We have to actually do something different than what everyone else is doing in order to achieve optimal health. Going back to the idea that the endotoxemia is coming from the small intestine, how much does leaky gut play a role in this? How much is like the dysbiosis being? Is the endotoxin being released into the small intestine, being deposited into the small intestine? Is that from our diet? Is it traveling up into the small intestines because of our diet, or can you kind of go upstream and help us understand, like reverse engineer, help us understand what is causing? Let's say we're super healthy people, like we're just doing healthy things. We're exercising, we're drinking clean water, we're trying to eat as healthy as possible. We're avoiding the polysorbate 80 in our ice cream. We're doing as much as we can. We're avoiding drugs and as much as we can, and just being as healthy as possible. And yet endotoxemia still exists. What is causing that to happen? What is causing it to travel up and then die in our small intestines and release the endotoxins to be absorbed into our body? Like what are we doing wrong?
So all those factors we discussed earlier, that disrupt the microbial composition of your GI tract, such as repeated antibiotics. It's not uncommon. By age 40, most people have taken 30 courses of antibiotics. Glyphosate, other herbicides and pesticides, chlorinated drinking water, halogenated hydrocarbons, all those things conspire to kill off numerous microbes. Now, that also hints at a solution here. So, as you know, if you have SIBO and endotoxemia, so 30 feet of trillions of microbes that don't belong in the small bowel, if you took a commercial probiotic, will it go away? No. You might reduce some of the symptoms of bloating, say, or some of the diarrhea, but you'll still be left with 30 feet of microbes, fecal microbes. And so I asked a different question. The conventional solution, if the mainstream doctor even knew what it was, and most of the time they don't. They say things like, "Did you consult Dr. Google again, Ashley?" Or "There's nothing wrong with you. Don't waste my time. There's no such thing." All the silly answers because they're not keeping up with the science. That's always been true. It takes a generation for the current practicing physicians to catch up with the science. So I know you, me, and your listeners are not willing to wait 20 or 30 years, but that's how long you have to wait for John Q primary care to catch up. So I asked different questions. I asked, well, okay, if SIBO is 30 feet of microbes, including 24 feet of small intestine, what if we chose species that we've lost that have two characteristics? One, they colonize the small intestine. That's where SIBO occurs, and produce what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics effective against the species of SIBO, like E. coli and Campylobacter. So I chose three. I chose a strain of Lactobacillus gasseri and Lactobacillus reuteri. Those two colonize the upper GI tract. Gasseri produces up to 7 bacteriocins, reuteri up to 4. And I also threw in Bacillus coagulans because it's got a good track record for eradicating irritable bowel syndrome. And by the way, is the most delicious yogurt you ever make. So, but we make yogurt out of this, not the kind of stuff you get in the grocery store. So I regret calling it yogurt. It looks and smells like yogurt, but it's not yogurt. It's really a fermentation vehicle. So we get these 3 microbes, we co-ferment them together for 36 hours. So a very unusual extended fermentation. That was my method I developed. And we did perform something called flow cytometry on the yogurt to count the microbes. And we get somewhere around 300 billion microbes per half cup serving. And so these microbes that we've lost that used to colonize the upper GI tract and produce bacteriocins are probably a big part of the reason why we've got SIBO. Now, the good news is, this is anecdote, of the 40 or so people who've made this yogurt, I call it SIBO yogurt, 90% now test negative by the AIR device. Even the conventional antibiotic for SIBO, rifaximin or Xifaxan, is only about 50 to 60% effective. And so I had hoped, I would have been thrilled with 50% effectiveness. I did not expect 90% effectiveness. Now, we're going to do a formal clinical trial down the road to validate this. But so far, actually, if I said the solution to SIBO is to take out your intestines or some awful thing like that, we better be damn confident in what's going on, right? But what if the solution is something akin to yogurt?
Yeah.
And so I've drifted towards this kind of thinking. You know what? If you think you have SIBO, just make the SIBO yogurt, And I'm seeing, as you've experienced, I think this can sometimes happen just with the reuteri yogurt. I suspect that's what happened in your instance, where you got rid of some of the dark feelings and your friend got rid of the diarrhea. It probably was because of the SIBO eradication, because of reuteri upper GI colonization, bacteriocin producing. I have a microbiologist friend. Oddly, I just moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to suburban Chicago, but in this general area, especially in Wisconsin, there are numerous, some of the largest probiotic manufacturers in the world, which always surprised me, but I think it's because of the dairy industry and fermentation. But there's a microbiologist, his name is Suresh, and he told me that he sometimes uses Lactobacillus reuteri to clean his fermentation vats that they use to produce microbes. And I said, well, really? I said, come on. So I called another microbiologist friend of mine, Dr. Raul Cano from Cal Polytech. And I said, hey, Raul, Suresh says he cleans his fermentation vats with L. reuteri. Does that sound right to you? Oh, yeah. That's how potent a microbe reuteri is. Ironically, it's also extremely susceptible to common antibiotics like amoxicillin. So you took amoxicillin maybe 20 years ago for an upper respiratory infection. It killed off your reuteri, your gasseri, and some others. And then that opened the door for upper GI, for small intestinal colonization and endotoxemia.
So just to back up and clarify, with the microbiologist using the L. reuteri to clean their devices, is it because it digests other bacteria, or it somehow fights it off? How does it effectively help to clean the devices?
So the bacteriocins they produce, the pharmaceutical industry, are always looking for new antibiotics. You know where they're
Mm-hmm.
discovering them? From microbes as
Mm.
bacteriocins. Now, we don't have to get involved with the pharma people, but it tells you that these bacteriocins are quite potent and they're
Mm-hmm.
specific for fecal microbes. So I think that's why we're seeing an extraordinary number of people normalize their breath hydrogen gas. Now,
Got it.
if all they did was normalize their breath hydrogen gas, that wouldn't be that interesting. Except that what I'm also seeing is this: somebody normalized their hydrogen gas and then says something like this: I lost 73 pounds on your program, but I hit a plateau. I could not lose the last 35 pounds. I now lost it. Or I was a type 2 diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C was 11.7, which is terrible. I did your program, it dropped to 6.1%. Much better, not perfect, which is 5.0% or less. I normalized my SIBO, hydrogen gas, it's now 4.7%. Or my rosacea is 80% better on the program, but it's not gone. I have occasional flare ups. I got rid of the SIBO and endotoxemia, it's now gone. So I'm seeing case after case of some residual health problem finally going away for good.
Oh, I love it. So many listeners are in that spot where they hit a plateau. They cleaned up so much of their life and they got good results, and then that plateau happens. It's like, but it could be better. It could be better. And what's especially the, oh, I can't eat this and I can't eat that and now I can't eat this. And I know some people who just, it's like they can only breathe air. Like that's they're just. I have one friend who she's had to resort to the carnivore diet, and she loves vegetables, but now her body she just reverted all the way back to not being able to eat anything except for meat. And she's, really would love to be able to tolerate vegetables. And I did get her to read your book, and I know that she started off with making the cranberry juice ferment. And I need to talk to her and see how that did, because I'd sent her to you and to start studying from you. So the Lactobacillus reuteri is almost like a natural, like nature's version of an antibiotic, where it's going to kind of help clean up the area of an overgrowth of something we don't want.
Exactly. And it colonizes the upper GI tract. So, in other words, it goes where the battle is being waged in the small intestine and
That's
produces
so
those
cool.
bacteriocins. So
That
that,
is
by the
so
way,
cool.
maybe your listeners want to know about that juice you're talking about. So I call that Saccharomyces boulardii sparkling juices.
Hmm.
So it's so darn easy. And if someone's new to fermentation, it's a really easy way to get introduced to fermentation. It's very simple. You get some juice. Hopefully, it's real juice. Just can't have any preservatives in it, like potassium sorbate or sodium benzoate, nothing like that. Just juice, preferably a pulpy type juice like apple cider or mango something. Empty one capsule of Florastor. It's a commercial probiotic that includes the fungus Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a cousin of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is used to make wine and beer. So empty one capsule, cap, lightly agitate to mix, and then loosen the cap and put it on your kitchen counter. Because at 24 hours, you're going to see it bubbling. It's producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. So keep that cap loose, because if you don't, it can actually explode. And at 48 hours, you have beautiful sparkling juice. The microbes have reduced sugar content by about half, but there's still some sugar in it. So we use small portions, like no more than a quarter cup, several times per day. It's one of the most powerful things you can do to help rebuild a broken microbiome, and can be used if you must take a course of antibiotics for some reason. This juice, this microbe, is the best thing there is for protecting your gastrointestinal microbiome from further damage.
Oh, I love it. And what I love about that is it's so affordable, because that one bottle of the floor store is going to last you a lifetime if you're making this juice with one capsule, and then you're drinking small amounts of it throughout the day. So I mean, you'll be able to use that for a long time. And so many people spend $30 to $50 per bottle of probiotics, and then and then they just keep having to buy it every month. Whereas you teach us how to take it and then culture it so that we're only buying one bottle every 6 months and culturing it to actually way more than what was in that bottle. Like when we make the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, we're culturing it so much.
Yeah, good
And that,
point. Good point. Actually, you're right. So I should have mentioned that the reason you save money is because you make the next batch from a little bit of the prior batch. And you're
yes.
exactly right. You can do this with probiotics also, and it's save a ton of money. Now, one of the things we don't know is when you grow, let's say there's 10 different microbial species in your probiotic. Several batches in, the relative proportions are going to change. So what I tell people generally is when you're about 7, 8, 9, 10 batches in, start over again. So you go back to the start if you want to continue to, so that you don't get let's say you plant zucchini and tomatoes and cucumbers in your backyard. Well, the zucchini is very aggressive and will eventually take over the garden. Same kind of thing can happen with microbes, that they're competing with each other, and it's going to change the relative proportions. So think about when you're several batches in, maybe starting over again. So but you're still saving a huge amount of money.
Got it. Now you'd mentioned rosacea, and that I've been thinking about skin because knowing that bacteria lives on our skin, and that in the past we used to use all these kinds of antibacterial soaps and even things with fragrances can disrupt the microbiome. And now we understand our microbiome of our skin is very delicate, and it's really needed. And when we restore it, there's women who have acne that go away, like just by focusing on protecting the microbiome of the skin. And you'd mentioned the rosacea going away, but what's been in the back of my mind is what about people with eczema and psoriasis? How does restoring the microbiome help them as well?
Well, I would urge people to start with the basics, that is the diet and the nutrients that affect insulin resistance and inflammation. 'Cause that also plays a big role in conditions like skin. But you're right. SIBO, endotoxemia, dysbiosis confined to the colon, those all play a role also. What's not entirely clear is if you have a condition like psoriasis or rosacea, how much benefit is there to actually directly addressing the skin microbiome? There's some preliminary evidence that when you have a skin rash like eczema, there's an imbalance in the relative proportion of the normal skin inhabitant called Staphylococcus epidermidis, and there's an increase in an unhealthy microbe, Staphylococcus aureus. So we still need better information, but it's tempting to believe that if you can restore Staphylococcus epidermidis and other healthy microbes in the skin, maybe you can further impact a skin rash.
And just what's going on, and so much we say this in holistic medicine, that your skin is a reflection of your gut, and your skin is a reflection of what's going on inside you. And oftentimes we see that like by removing gluten grains, the skin improves. And then even with the Lactobacillus reuteri and supporting a healthy gut microbiome, we see skin improvement, just like with your studies are showing that the dermal layer is increasing. We have an increase in the collagen production, that we're seeing outward beauty. And there's anecdotal stories about women noticing wrinkles going away, that we're seeing the skin becomes more vibrant when our internal health becomes more vibrant. So I want to
Absolutely.
look, I don't want to look 50 when I'm 50. Because I want to look like I'm super healthy because I work so dang hard on it, and don't we all want to look super healthy on the outside when we're doing so much to be healthy on the inside? And I just want everyone to feel amazing on the inside, but also have that outward reflection. I got mistaken, and I don't think he was joking. I got mistaken for being in my 20s at the bank the other day because he thought I was the daughter of my mother-in-law, and he was really surprised to hear my age, and I was like, oh, I was on a high the rest of the day. But I also been doing a lot to be healthy for many years, and I think it's paying off. I think I see it in the mirror. But that, I love that what you talked about in episode 476, where you talked about the women who were noticing that they were looking younger and more vibrant when they looked in the mirror after correcting their gut health and also introducing the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt into their lives. And then you had hinted on, and I'd like to dig deeper into this, that you have done some human clinical trials, and that you were talking about that it was something that you invented that has Lactobacillus reuteri in it for the skin. Can we get into that?
Sure. So, a lot of ladies are making the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, but they kept on saying to me, I'm sick and tired of making the yogurt. Do you have some way I could just buy it? Or I'm traveling and I don't want to bring my yogurt making apparatus with me. And so I formulated a product that included Lactobacillus reuteri, uh, and I added some other components like marine source collagen hydrolysates and hyaluronic acid. And that combination has been working very well for us. We had a preliminary trial, we got very nice results. We did a formal clinical trial and did measures like that high resolution skin ultrasound and did see improvements in dermal thickness, as well as the investigator. This was conducted by a dermatologist, and participant ratings on such things as moisture and glow and luster. So we got very nice results. We're going to continue to explore and validate all these kinds of effects, but I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing in our preliminary trials, and it is consistent with all the stuff that was seen in the mouse trials and other human evidence. So I think we're on the right track to providing a product. This product was called Gut to Glow, and that contains, so it's the reuteri with added components to stack the odds in favor of better skin. Because we know from other people's science that there's a ton of evidence that collagen peptides do reduce skin wrinkles. And by the way, also makes your joints better because joint cartilage is mostly collagen. And there's good science to tell us that when you ingest collagen orally, it gets to the joints and it gets to skin. And the hyaluronic acid likewise. Hyaluronic acid is the body's master moisturizer. So you take it orally, it gets to the skin, moisturizes the skin, dermal layer, not just epidermis like topical applied hyaluronic acid, and also adds to joint lubrication as the synovial fluid. And I believe we're going to start seeing evidence that hyaluronic acid also has beneficial effects on the brain because the brain has a lot of hyaluronic acid also. And by the way, so does the uterus, cervix, and vagina because dryness is a problem for ladies, particularly in their late 60s and 70s. And hyaluronic acid is a major component of the female reproductive tract. So I think we're going to have to validate a lot of these kinds of effects over time. But so far, even in preliminary evidence, we're starting to see very nice effects.
Okay. So when I was listening, I thought, okay, what is this? Is this a face cream? Like, what's going on? So you've created a way to take it internally. It's a supplement, and we're seeing results on the outside, so we're seeing results on the skin. But when you see the skin getting better, we also know that all the it's affect the skin on the inside, right? Because the lungs are related to skin tissue, the gut is related to skin tissue. Those are all forms of, like, they're very related with its use of collagen. And so I'm imagining it's not going to just affect the skin on the outside, it's going to also play a role in helping on the inside as well.
Absolutely. So it is reuteri after all. We used a different strain than the one that was used in the MIT studies, and we're validating how much this one microbe does. We did some animal work. We're doing some human work with that strain. So there's a lot more to be explored yet, but we are seeing very positive effects. Many more clinical trials planned, all limited by budget. That's the limiting factor, a lot of this stuff. But we are seeing, as you have experienced and your friend has experienced, some of your listeners, some very interesting early effects. And that's why I say I cringe to think, Ashley, how little we knew just a few years ago. When you don't factor in all the effects of the microbiome, you know almost nothing about health because it plays such a huge role in all aspects of health. By the way, we're seeing big effects in a lot of emotional and mental issues like anxiety. One of the biggest effects of endotoxemia is anxiety. Also, fungal overgrowth in the gastrointestinal tract. A big symptom, a very common symptom, is anxiety. I see people, they're being prescribed Xanax and other anti-anxiety drugs when the whole thing, a lot of the times, is overgrowth, either of bacteria or fungi or both. and we're seeing dramatic reductions in anxiety. Not from the gut to glow. This is just with addressing overgrowth of bacteria and fungi. We're seeing dramatic effects on reduction of anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I know you have to be careful when you're formulating and selling a supplement to making medical claims, and I know you need to be very careful with your language. But what we can see is we can look at the effect, what each ingredient, how all the science around it, and the results people get from it, and then we can hope that we're going to get that same result by taking a supplement with it, with those same ingredients. And I'm excited to hear more about your clinical trials. I'm excited to hear more. Is there anything else that you can share specifically about your clinical trials or upcoming projects that you are working on around this?
Because there's some intellectual property issues here, I can't say everything until we have all our patents filed.
Yeah.
But one of the things we saw in our first human clinical trial was an unexpected dramatic change in body composition. So we're going to explore that. And I'll be talking about that in coming probably months or years as we get beyond these patent issues, patent protection. But suffice to say that we have the capacity, I believe, or will in future, to have dramatic effects on the body shape.
Wow. That is very cool. Is that could you share your hypothesis around why you believe that effect happens?
So I'm speculating. I did design a very elaborate clinical trial. It probably won't get done for another 6 months or so because it's very expensive, in which we'll look at such things as DEXA for body composition, baseline, and follow up. Look at things like so that endotoxin, we can measure endotoxin. It's called LPS, serum LPS. I believe that we're going to see an improvement in insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is the fundamental process that drives risk for diabetes, heart disease, dementia, cancers. In other words, it underlies many, many, many modern chronic conditions. And if you can improve insulin resistance, you've had a major impact on that person's health. So we need to document, is there a change in insulin resistance? I think there's going to be, but we need to prove that. We also want to know, these very popular drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic, these are called GLP-1 agonists because they reduce blood sugar. But you may have heard that people are scrambling for these drugs because they lead to weight loss also. And they work because they're GLP-1 agonists. Well, I believe that's one thing we have to also explore. Do we have a GLP agonist alternative? So lots of things that we don't have answers to yet, but we will be exploring in clinical trials.
That is so exciting. We need a listener who just won the lottery to just donate a few $1,000,000. We need someone who has just a few $1,000,000 and that's burning a hole in their pocket. If I won the lottery, I'd be spending on for some really cool clinical trials. I think that'd be a lot of fun to fund some kind of holistic clinical trials that could help revolutionize the world and our health for the whole planet as we know it. If we could introduce everyone to these seemingly simple, I don't want to call it a fix, but seemingly simple, aids, tools, solutions. If everyone could make the Florastor juice, if everyone could try some of the Lactobacillus reuteri to get, to correct their gut, correct endotoxemia, how many people would get off of anxiety meds, sleep meds, sleep aids? How many people would get off of antidepressants? How many people get off of antacids? Just think of all the things that people could correct. And every time we take a drug, this is something that a lot of my listeners know already, but maybe some don't. But every time we take a drug depletes the body of key nutrients because the liver, the kidneys, we have to process it. And it forces the body to do something. It forces a physiological effect. It's not gentle. It's not natural. And so a lot of times these drugs people take deplete the body further and further when the body was already depleted to begin with. And I see a world, this is my utopia, where everyone is so healthy they don't need drugs, or drugs are maybe like we use 90% less drugs, right? Because we're so healthy we don't need them. think about the people in chronic pain. You mentioned fibromyalgia. I introduced my friend to, she's fibromyalgia, and this was 15 years ago. She had a pump, put a morphine pump surgically installed in her body. That's how much pain she was in. And she brought me into her bedroom and showed me her two drawers in her bedside table dresser. She opened both drawers and said, "These are all my meds." It
Wow.
was, I mean, and she goes, "Most of these are pain meds." And she was not overweight, ate very healthy, and she was in chronic pain all the time. And I heard about how certain key nutrient deficiencies can exacerbate and sometimes even trigger that chronic pain. And so I got her some vitamins and some minerals, especially selenium, which there's been a link to low selenium levels leading to or exacerbating that pain known as fibromyalgia. And she told me within a few months of doing that, and I mean, I preached to go gluten free, but I don't know if she did. She said to me, "You know those two drawers?" She goes, "Just with the changes, I got rid of one drawer, a whole drawer. 50% of her meds was reduced in a matter of months by taking some minerals and some vitamins." And maybe she did listen to me and get rid of the gluten. But for like, just if we can make that change, if we could just increase certain nutrients or correct the gut, and someone could eliminate their meds by 50% or 75%, their quality of life is going up and up and up. So that's my vision for the world, is to have your tools that you teach in your books and on your website, and now with your, I love that you've created the Gut to Glow formula, so that we can help people restore themselves from the inside to glow on the outside. So I get the marketing. I get the marketing. I like the name. It's simple. It's catchy. I like it.
You make an excellent point, Ashley. That is the unintended adverse consequences of pharmaceuticals. You know, even drugs that people thought were benign, like stomach acid blocking drugs or statin cholesterol drugs, are now known to have very serious impacts on health and on the microbiome. So stomach acid blocking drugs, when you turn off stomach acid, you allow oral microbes. You know, the mouth is second only to the colon in the density of microbes, which is kind of scary when you think about that when you're kissing somebody. But so when you lose stomach acid, oral microbes populate the stomach and duodenum, and fecal microbes start to ascend into the small bowel, all just from blocking stomach acid. Likewise,
Wow.
statin cholesterol drugs, even if you're slender and young, it turns your gastrointestinal microbiome into the microbiome of an obese type 2 diabetic. And that's the presumptive reason to explain why there's a 30 to 50% increase in your likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes when you take a statin cholesterol drug.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we did have a conversation in one of our interviews. Might have been the first interview we did about statins, because I get on my soapbox with them and how absolutely horrible they are for our health, and the benefits are so minuscule in relation to the horrible effects of statins, and you were able to outline that. The what people don't understand is that it harms the liver. It makes the liver not produce the cholesterol our body's trying to produce, and it doesn't actually correct the problem, because heart disease isn't caused by the cholesterol. Cholesterol is the kind of wrapped up like smoke. Like, you see smoke and you think, oh, that there must be a fire because I see smoke, like the smoke is causing the fire, right? It's the other way around. There's inflammation. There's our whole lifestyle that's leading to that disease, and to take a statin is just going to disrupt so many functions. But where everyone thinks that they need to lower like LDL, right? What is it? And you, with your extensive background, what is the best way to help the body lower LDL cholesterol and have good healthy cholesterol and be heart disease free?
Well, what I tell people is get a big black magic marker and cross out those numbers and ignore them. So, you know, there's a lot there to talk about. But the real tragedy of focusing on cholesterol is that it took everybody's attention away from the real causes of heart disease. So
Yeah.
you're exactly right. Statin cholesterol drugs reduce cardiovascular events in a very minor way. They help a little bit. But what about all the other causes you mentioned? Insulin resistance, inflammation, vitamin D deficiency, omega-3 fatty acid deficiency,
Mm.
endotoxemia. Those are all
Mm-hmm.
very important causes that hardly ever are mentioned by any cardiologist. So what I do is we throw away cholesterol testing and we do the real test, which is lipoprotein testing, like NMR lipoprotein testing. We look at measures of insulin resistance, like fasting glucose, insulin, and hemoglobin A1C. We look at your vitamin D status, 25 hydroxy vitamin D. Look at your thyroid status, TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies. And you can add other things on, but if you just do those basic tests, you see that cholesterol has nothing to do with heart disease. Cholesterol was meant to be, in the 1950s and 1960s, was meant to be an indirect marker for the factors that actually, the lipoproteins, the fat-carrying proteins in the bloodstream that actually cause heart disease. Well, in 1958, 1960, it was very difficult to measure those lipoproteins. So they devised very crude indirect methods to quantify them. And so they measured cholesterol. It was not meant to be the cause. It was meant to be an indirect marker, but it
Mm-hmm.
became viewed as the cause because it makes a lot of money for the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
But when you focus on cholesterol, this outdated house of cards, you start to come away with false lessons. That's why 80 million Americans take statin cholesterol drugs, but there's been no reduction in heart disease incidence. And that's why the hospital, your local hospital, can add on a $100 million new cardiovascular wing because heart disease remains the number one moneymaker for hospitals. So their little secret is my colleagues like that there continues to be lots of heart disease because they're not focusing on the real causes. The truth of it is actually managing cardiovascular risk is easy and it's almost free and does not require a drug in 99.9% of people.
I love it. Thank you so much for clarifying that because our friends and family need to hear this. The second you go to a hospital and you're over a certain age, or you go to your doctor, you're over a certain age, they automatically want to put you on a cholesterol med. And I feel like
Yep.
the pharmaceutical industry sends those doctors to Jamaica once a year or something. Like there's got to be some kind of incentive because of how prolific it is. And it depletes the body of CoQ10. It bruises the liver to where the liver isn't producing healthy cholesterol. And people end up with neuropathy, and then they're falling down and breaking their hip or whatever because they're not being able to feel. I have a uncle who can't feel his hands and feet and hasn't been able to feel them for years. He's been on statins for years, and I've been begging him, please get off of them. And he's like, nope, my doctor's smart. He knows what he's doing. And then he falls down all the time because he can't feel his hands or feet. The neuropathy from taking the statins. And
Wow.
it's just mind blowing the amount everyone is just keeping the wool over their eyes. Nope, nope. My doctor knows what they're doing. I'm not going to question anything. Nope, nope. I don't want to be accused of listening to Dr. Google. It's like advocate for yourselves. This is a for-profit industry, right? This is for profit. Like people question the dealership more when they're buying a car than they do their doctor when they're being put on a drug.
Very true. Very true.
It's ridiculous.
That's
It's
a
for
critical thing for people
profit.
to understand. It is exactly as you say, Ashley. It is a profit-making venture. It's all.
Hmm.
That's what. Sadly, it shouldn't be that way. But that's what's put first in the healthcare system is revenue and profit. It's not
Yeah.
health.
So I know we've got a bunch of like black sheep, salmon swimming upstream kind of listeners who are ready and willing to do what it takes to get their health back. But we have friends and family we love that are put on statins and the damage is being done. And of course, all the drugs that people take disrupts the microbiome as well. We're only beginning to understand because it affects the mitochondria. We're really just only beginning to understand everything. I feel like 100 years from now, we'll look back and look at these drugs like we do now when we look at leeches and bleeding the body, in the 1500s and 1700s or bloodletting was all the rage. And now it's like drugs is all the rage. And in 100 years, it's definitely going to be microbiome based medicine. That's for sure. I'm seeing that we're going into an area where we're going to be using light as therapy, phototherapy, and we're going to be using the microbiome and supporting using different healthy bacterial strains to balance the body, especially if you can take one and increase your collagen. I mean, that's just amazing. You can make your skin beautiful. How long do people start to notice a difference in their skin? Because it must take time to, I see the body is doing triage work, right? Like when you take certain supplements for hair, skin, and nails, it's not right away because the body's doing triage work on the inside. And then maybe 3 months down the road, you start noticing better hair, skin, and nails when you're taking those kind of supplements with niacin and the different biotin and those kind of things. But how long do people see results when they take the gut to glow formula?
We've seen subtle changes at 4 weeks that become more marked at 8 and then 12 weeks. Particularly the fine wrinkles, the low volume wrinkles like crow's feet around the eyes and the smile lines, those tend to recede visibly by 12 weeks. The deeper wrinkles like the nasolabial fold along the sides of the mouth, the big ones, or the forehead wrinkles, those require more volume. So we don't know, our clinical trials have only gone to 12 weeks or 3 months. So we don't know just how much you can expect long term, but I predict that they'll have an effect longer term. But we're seeing the reduction in fine wrinkles at 12 weeks, increase in skin moisture, so much so that ladies are telling us they don't need to use as much moisturizer on their face and hands anymore. And there's kind of a glow. I think that's the increase in sebum. Sebum is the moisturizer of the skin. And so that's among the earliest effects, by the way. The increase in moisture can happen within days, but visibly by 4 weeks, but more so by 8 and 12 weeks.
Now, you had mentioned the other areas for females like vaginal dryness when we're getting older. Are women noticing that by taking this also they're noticing they're less dry in other areas?
Well, we haven't looked at that in our clinical trials because it wasn't among the endpoints we were looking at. I can tell you from the yogurt, though, I've asked that. Every week I have a two-way Zoom. Like last night I did it for 2 hours with 98 people. And I'll occasionally ask them, are you experiencing an increase in vaginal moisture? So let's talk about that for a moment. As ladies get older through the menopause, particularly in their late 60s and 70s, it becomes almost universal that a woman will experience what the gynecologists now label the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or we say GSM. Three facets: loss of libido, vaginal atrophy, dryness, irritation, discharge, and pain, and urinary complaints like urge incontinence, you pee when you cry, I'm sorry, when you cough, or repeated urinary tract infections. So loss of libido, vaginal atrophy, urinary problems. I believe we have a way to address the whole thing, but that's another formulation I created. I can't tell you about it fully yet. I will be
Ooh,
talking
I
about
can't wait
that
to have
probably
you back.
within the next year.
Oh,
But
come back in a year and update us. I can't wait to hear it.
But I will tell you, I think the Reuteri may be key here. So we have no clinical data. I'm going by what is known from other people's science. That the Reuteri, I believe, is a key component for ladies to regain vaginal moisture. And it doesn't hurt to throw in hyaluronic acid, right? Because your uterus, cervix, and vagina is largely hyaluronic acid.
Love it. Okay, well, I can't wait to hear about stuff happening in the next year. We'll definitely have you back on. We should just do an annual meetup of the
Okay.
minds and hear all the updates.
Be
I love
happy
it.
to, Ashley.
I'm gonna start hunting for a millionaire to invest
Oh,
in
please
more
do.
trials for you. I'll let you know when I find one. I'm sure there's one out there that is excited as me and wants to get more of these clinical trials going. That'd be fun. Now, you had talked, when we talked about making the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, you were really clear that it needs to be made with something that contains fat. And I remember looking around, kind of going at plant-based options, being like, okay, well, I need to make sure that there's something really fatty. And that's why I came upon cashew yogurt, and it works really well with the
Well, I'd love to
cashews.
see
And
your recipe, by the way.
I will share it gladly. It
Oh, thank
tastes
you.
amazing. It's
Okay.
so delicious. And I will gladly share it with you. I've been, like I said, made over 30 batches, so I've kind of played with it and perfected it. And I make it like thick, like a Greek yogurt. I tried coconut yogurt, like with the cream, coconut cream, and it was, to me, honestly, it was disgusting. The soy one was even worse. But I got the result. See, I mean, it was the worst thing I've ever ate/drank because it was like liquidy, so I just drank it. It was the worst tasting thing ever, but I was willing to do it because I felt amazing, right? And so, but now that I've perfected the cashew yogurt, it's thick like Greek yogurt. It's so delicious. I'm actually salivating right now thinking about it. But you said it's really important that when we make Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, that there be a fat component. And that kind of surprised me because, which I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but it does because I always think of when we ferment, we need carbohydrates, right? So to hear that there was, well, we know we got to make sure that there's some fat in this. And for me, it's a plant-based fat coming from cashews. But can you explain why Lactobacillus reuteri or why, this particular formula requires us to, when we ingest it, to have fat?
Well, I think what's confusing is, most yogurt is low fat or non-fat. And I reject that whole notion that we should limit fat. And so I use organic half and half, which is 18% fat, because I think we should get fat. And I think the best part of dairy's got its issues, but the most beneficial component of dairy is the fat, ironically. So it's just part of my rejection of the low fat notion. But you actually don't need fat. You can ferment, for instance, salsa, which is very low in fat, and it generates a delicious effervescent salsa, for instance, or hummus. Hummus is a good vehicle also. I've never done the cashew, so I'm dying to see your recipe for that. Because people are always asking, I don't want to do dairy, what else can I do? And I've been suggesting coconut milk, which makes an okay yogurt.
It's gross. I'll share mine. You'll love it. It's delicious. You'll want to do it instead of cow milk. You'll love it. So does the body need to have fat in order to utilize Lactobacillus reuteri, or was it just because you see fat as a healthy component of all of our diets that we shouldn't shy away from it?
Yeah, the microbe will, as you point out, the microbe just needs some kind of either fiber or sugar.
Okay.
It doesn't really need the fat. But
Got it.
But you need fat, so
Right.
It took
love it.
40 years of this ridiculous experiment in cutting total fat and saturated fat to show us how harmful that is. In some ways, I'm grateful that the government agencies and the pharmaceutical industry screwed up so badly, because it shows us what happens. Because we have now an epidemic of unhealthy humans, obese, diabetic, with autoimmune diseases and greater cognitive impairment, all because of misguided dietary advice, absurd pharmaceuticals, and a predatory food system.
Oh, that is so well put. Predatory food system. I was just explaining that the other day. Well, all the time, but the other day I was talking to a personal trainer who's super into health, and he was like, "Yeah, I can't get my kid to stop eating Doritos." I'm like, "Wait a second, you let Doritos in your house?" And so I had to back up, like in a super loving way, be like, "So do you understand? Like, just something to understand. If any food comes from a manufacturer, that company has hired food scientists to make it hyper palatable and to tickle your brain like cocaine does. Every single company, that if it comes out of a package, they figured out exactly how much salt, how much monosodium glutamate, how much red dye, whatever, how much everything it takes to light your brain scan up like 4th of July, so that you will keep eating their gross, excuse for food. And we're addicted as a nation, as a world, to these processed foods that are they're frankenfoods. But they light up our brain, make us feel good. And we think, oh, well, we feel good. We got to keep eating this, right? And like Dr. Joel Fuhrman says, cocaine can make you feel good too, but it's not good for you. So stop thinking that food that makes you feel good is good for you. And focus on foods that don't come from manufacturers, but come from a farm. Right? Eat food that comes from a farm, not a manufacturer, and you're going to be doing so much better with your health. I had a food scientist on the show, and she explained that crazy world behind the scenes of how they will look at brain scans and these like the company that makes these things like Doritos will do almost like these neuro studies on exactly how much of each of these ingredients they need to put in to make you as addicted as possible, to make the dopamine go up as much. So we got to be really careful. And then how much do all those chemicals affect the gut microbiome? Whatever we eat is not only feeding our cells, but it's feeding the bacteria in our gut. So we have to be pretty careful, because it's what you feed in your gut is what you're going to get in your life, all the results you're going to get.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ashley. Yeah, modern processed food is a disaster.
Well, man, I'm kind of just spinning thinking about the possibilities. So you talk about how like we're missing Lactobacillus reuteri, but there's in your book there's so many other different things to look for, and what I love is you have this table of different strains of bacteria, and it's almost like you're looking at a pharmacy for your gut, and you're like, okay, if these are your symptoms, go for this, and if this is your problem, then start with this, and so you can kind of look down and go, if you want these results, athletes can take a different probiotic for this function. I'm thinking about kids because kids don't necessarily need Lactobacillus reuteri. I mean, maybe they do, but what can kids kids benefit from taking Gut to Glow, or is there a different strain that would be better for them? Or maybe tell me who would benefit the most from taking the Gut to Glow formula that has the Lactobacillus reuteri in it.
I look at the gut to glow as a convenience. So someone who doesn't want to make the yogurt or wants a better skin effects because of the added components, or does something like travel, doesn't want to bring their yogurt making apparatus. Now, but there's another question in here. Who needs Reuteri? Well, the only group I think that should not do the yogurt as written are pregnant ladies. Because when you approach delivery in the in the 2 weeks or so prior to delivery, the density of oxytocin receptors goes up 200-fold in
Wow.
the uterus in preparation for delivery. And that's why if you wanted to say deliver your child on Wednesday, August 23rd at 8 a.m., you're instructed to come to the hospital and they put an IV and they give you an oxytocin injection, and it causes uterine contraction. So it's probably not wise to get that super duper high account of Reuteri and thereby presumptively oxytocin in a pregnant woman. But when you think about it, if all primitive humans have Reuteri, if all mammals have it, and we're the exceptions, and by the way, there is evidence to show us that only 40 years ago, the majority of people had Reuteri. Now, almost nobody has it. So I think having it is good for everybody, even a pregnant woman. What I don't know is the 300 or so billion microbes in the yogurt per half cup serving. Is that advisable for a pregnant? Probably not. And so what I tell ladies who are pregnant or of childbearing age or children is you can make the yogurt, but do a mixed culture yogurt. So think of it like this. If all you grew in your backyard garden, let's say your 10 by 10 backyard garden, if all you grew was tomatoes, you're going to have a lot of tomatoes. What if you grew tomatoes and zucchini and cucumbers and squash? How many tomatoes will you have? You'll have far fewer. So if you do a mixed culture yogurt, so one easy trick is to start with your Reuteri. You can start with capsules or tablets, or you can get some Reuteri yogurt from someone else or a prior batch of your own, and then get a commercial yogurt that has, let's say, 4 or 5 other microbes in it, and mix them together. And so you'll have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 different microbes, and you won't get those super duper high counts. So that is perfectly safe for kids or for a pregnant lady, because you're not getting the super duper high counts.
Oh, that's brilliant. Now, I noticed since I've been eating it for the last year that I can eat like one or 2 or 3 days. I can eat it for a few days, and I feel the effects for weeks. And then I feel like, and for me, the effects, it's that like, oh, I just feel like almost like that euphoria. Like I definitely get it. And then feel it just slowly drop off, and then I eat some more. So I don't actually eat it every day now. I used to, but I wanted to see like how long does this last, and it does last. I feel like it lasts for a few weeks, and then it kind of just drops off. But we talked a little bit about this. I want to know if there's any more science since you follow up on all the recent, studies around it. Have we figured out, or are we any closer to figuring out how to repopulate the gut with Lactobacillus reuteri so that it sustains itself?
Fundamental question. It's a very critical question that we don't have an answer to. So if mom gave you Reuteri, let's say by passage through the birth canal and breastfeeding, barring exposure to things like antibiotics, you would carry that microbe for a lifetime. But if you get it through the yogurt or a capsule, you get it for a few weeks at best. Well, what's the difference? It's probably the microbes live in communities, just like humans do. In other words, we don't live by ourselves. We have partners, families, co-workers, neighbors, communities. Microbes are the same. And though it's called guilds or consortia in the microbe world, we don't yet know who else is supposed to be in the Reuteri guild or consortium. So I think the probiotic of the future, or the way we'll do it in the future, is here's Reuteri with maybe 7 other species that are required for Reuteri to take up permanent residence, so that you can take that capsule, say, for maybe a week, and you'll have it for a lifetime. But so far, no one's worked out the details.
I was fascinated to learn that there's a type of bacteria that's really common in the gut that lives off of, I forget, you might know, you probably know it, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a real common one, and it digests and eats candida. And candida is like its food. And so candida is like needed in the body, but 90% less than everyone actually has. It's needed. It's a food for these bacteria. And it made me think, so when your body's in balance, you have a little bit of candida, and the candida is actually the food that's growing, kind of like grass that's growing for cows. It's like the grass growing in your body to feed this bacteria that's really healthy for us. And it made me think, well, so the Lactobacillus reuteri, maybe it's supposed to eat something or digest something, and that's missing also. Like there's this wonderful colony, like the guild, like you said, the microbe guild that lives together, that feeds each other and balances each other out and protects each other. And we've really messed ourselves up in the last generation. Like from my grandma to where we are now, we've just really messed up the entire human race by wiping out so much of our microbiome. And I wish I had a time machine and could go 100 years in the future and see the kind of advancements in understanding how we can restore the gut. But I can't wait for the day that the labs figure out what's the perfect balance for that microbe guild so that we could really get a leg up. But you're on the right track with teaching us how to ferment and bring it into our bodies within food in such a natural way. I really feel like you, out of all the doctors out there, have your finger on the pulse of restoring the gut and thus cascade effect of restoring the whole body. So thank you so much for everything you do. I love your work. I love your books.
No, thank you, Ashley.
You're so easy to learn from, and like I told you many years ago, just discovering your work was so cathartic for me, because it's like, oh, finally, validation. I'm on the right track with removing these grains from my life and seeing such a positive result. Now that brings me to one of my last points, which is that some people say, well, I don't feel a difference when I remove weed. I don't feel a difference, and so therefore I'm not allergic to it. I don't have to remove it. And I think that that's a misnomer for a lot of people. If you don't, I'm doing air quotes here, but like feel a difference, I don't think that you're supposed to feel how good an apple is for you when you eat an apple, but there are, and when you start studying the nutritional aspects of like how that pectin is helping you and all the things it's feeding in your gut, you don't feel it. It's not an emotion, just like stress is an emotion, but you could die from too much stress, right? So you don't necessarily feel the body. Sometimes I feel Lactobacillus reuteri because I am definitely noticing, for me, I'm feeling that oxytocin. I'm feeling everything kind of balancing for me, but some people don't feel anything. And it's like with changing their diet, they don't feel it at first. But can you just give us some hope and some encouragement and say, listen, like, how long should someone stick with going grain free, for example, or removing the gluten grains, or trying the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt? Like, is it something like it's just stay with it for 3 months and just give it a shot, just do it and do it for a few months and then measure some noticeable outcomes? Or can you give us some hope? Because so many people will try something for a few weeks and say, well, I didn't feel a difference, so then they just stop.
Well, so you're right. There's a mixture of perceived benefits, but there's also a lot of unperceived benefits occur below the surface. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, my whole thinking on wheat and grains got its start when I took wheat and grains out of the diet because people had heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw in people with coronary disease, and this is, by the way, borne out in 55 clinical trials, this is not just some anecdote, that the most common cause for coronary disease, heart attacks, angina, sudden cardiac death, I mean, serious stuff, is an excess of small LDL particles, not LDL cholesterol, that crude indirect marker, but the actual lipoprotein particles themselves, small LDL particles. Because small particles are not recognized by the liver, and so they persist in the bloodstream for 5 to 7 days compared to large LDL particles that last only 24 hours. Small LDL is much more prone to oxidation, much more prone to cause inflammation when it gets access into the wall of an artery. It's much more adherent to the artery wall. In other words, a small LDL is this little evil thing perfectly crafted to cause heart disease. When you eat one bagel or a slice of pizza, you've got oodles of small LDL for a week.
Mm.
In other words, that you can't tell. There's no way for you to tell that. You'd have to do like an NMR lipoprotein analysis to find that out. So that's one example of the many non-perceived effects of consuming grains. So when you stop eating wheat, grains, and sugars, and small LDL drops from say 2,000 nanomoles per liter particle count per volume to zero, you won't be able to tell that. Likewise, if your blood sugar drops from the pre-diabetic range to the normal range or ideal range, you can't tell that either.
Yeah, you can't feel it.
If you're exposed to the gliadin protein of wheat that increases intestinal permeability in everybody, not just celiac people, but in everybody, and thereby increases endotoxemia and raises blood sugar and blood pressure and plays with your moods, anxiety, depression. You might not be aware of that. You might not believe that that was due to the fact that you stopped eating, once you stop eating grains, a lot of those effects go away. So there's a lot of things that happen that people don't understand, don't recognize as being due to grain consumption or lack of Reuteri or whatever. And so I think it's a mistake to say, I don't feel any different, therefore it must not be doing good for me. Because you'd have to do a more deep exploration to understand the full impact.
Got it. And so it's better to just take the science, take what you've shared, and just go with it. Give it, make those changes and give it time instead of judging it too quickly. And I
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and because you don't necessarily feel all those physiological changes, but eventually down the line, like people will notice their body composition changing. People will
Yes.
notice
Yes.
those inches going off, and sometimes you don't see pounds go off, but you see inches go off, or sometimes so sometimes it's that the body's shifting, and you just give it time, and man, I feel so good off gluten and off those grains. I feel so good with the Lactobacillus Reuteri yogurt. Um, it is for me. It's fantastic, and I'm so happy that you formulated this gut to glow, because there's people out there, like you said, they can't make the yogurt for whatever reason. They can't make it. Their life's super crazy and busy, or they're traveling, and they just want to keep getting the benefits of it. So you've produced something that's going to help everyone, men and women. I think men like the effects of looking good too, but also you said like it helps joints. The with the known ingredients that help joints. So overall everything's good. Um, I want to have you back a year from now, or less, when you've got these studies and these other things that you're working on down the road.
Sure,
Any
Ashley.
other projects you can share with us? You're so busy. I was curious to know if you have ideas for the next book, but I know you're really focusing on this. So is there anything else, any other projects or that are in the pipeline?
I'm thinking about a number of things. One of the things that's changing my life is the fact that people like you and me, other podcasters, YouTubers, bloggers, etc., have all been blacklisted by major media
Mm,
because I believe it's because big pharma pumps so much money into media that if you write a book on health or nutrition, you can't get on TV anymore. And so that hurts book sales, of course. I've even had publishers say to me, if we can't make money publishing books on health, maybe we won't publish books on health.
Jeez.
So that's the impact that the pharmaceutical industry has had. So what does that mean for the future of books or other things? And that's why, by the way, I'm so appreciative of what you're doing and other podcasters and bloggers, et cetera, is because if we're all, not just me, but all of us are blacklisted from major media. How do we get the word of truth out to people? Well, that's what you're doing. So that's why I support what you're doing, because we have to get this word out to people. So does that mean if you want to write a book on health, you have to not use a title that suggests it's about health? So I've been playing with that idea because it's still a lot of fun writing books and you get your message out. And it's a great way to learn something, to sit back and sit in your chair and read about some new ideas, because it's not going to come from the doctor. We all know that. The last person to consult on health is the doctor. He and she doesn't know anything about health. I'm talking mainstream docs. There are very good naturopaths and chiropractors and functional medicine docs who do get it. But John Q. mainstream doctor does not understand it all. So how do we get that message out? So thinking about several books, but got to somehow work around this awful blacklisting process.
Okay, I've got a title for you. Wink, wink. This is definitely not a health book. Just make the title Wink, wink, and then have you kind of winking in like a lab coat with a stethoscope, like wink, wink. Definitely not a health book. That's the next book, okay? And then I'll write your forward or something.
That's great.
Love it. Well, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna share my cashew yogurt with you, which is super delicious.
Do. And I'll give proper credit.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I love it. It's win-win for everyone. And I did play around with I did some batches with adding other strains that are in your book. And it was fun doing that. So not just Reuteri, but also playing around with the other strains. And I highly recommend that listeners No, it's fine. I highly recommend that listeners go and check out everything that Dr. Davis has written and done, and his website. And of course, the links to everything is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. We're going to make sure that we link the Gut to Glow formula so that listeners can get it, and all the links there, including all the books, is going to be there in the show notes and also in the description of this episode, wherever you're listening from. If you're listening on your Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you're listening from, Rumble, Library, all the alternative spaces that we're on as well. Just look in the show notes in the podcast app, and you'll find all the links. We're going to make sure that they're there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so great chatting with you. And I'm just such a huge fan of all your work. And thank you for being so approachable and so open and willing to educate us. The root word for doctor is docere, which means teacher. And that surprises people because our experience is kind of more like the old school teacher that would like slap you with a ruler, than the very not approachable teacher. That's kind of like going to the doctor. And you're I think what they meant by when they came up with the word doctor, that the docere, the idea of teaching us health. And that's why my podcast is called Learn True Health, because as doctors, you're here to teach us to then go, achieve it and find it and create true health. So thank you so much for being such an advocate for us to gain our true health. And I so appreciate what you do. I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Anytime. It's my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Dr. William Davis. He's amazing. I love him. If you want my Lactobacillus reuteri cashew yogurt delicious recipe, please go to learntruehealth.com and you'll find it there. It'll also be in the show notes of today's podcast. And also you can go to the Facebook group, the Learn True Health Facebook group. You'll see the recipe there along with comments and conversations in the Facebook group with other listeners about it. You don't have to make it out of cashews. You can make it out of other ingredients. And if you want to discuss that, you can jump into the Learn True Health Facebook group and we can chat about other methods to make the Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt. Or if you just want to get the benefits without having to make the yogurt, definitely check out Dr. William Davis's Lactobacillus reuteri supplement, which he calls Gut to Glow. You can go to learntruehealth.com/glow. That's learntruehealth.com/glow. Use coupon code LTH10, that's LTH10, for 10% off your first order or 15% off a subscription, LTH15. And if you want to book a session with me to chat about the amazing phototherapy patches, if you want to increase your body's glutathione production, stem cells, balance your sex hormones, your stress hormones, your thyroid, regrow joints. People are reversing arthritis and wear and tear on their body, lowering inflammation, bone density, increased bone density. There's studies showing that this increases bone density. People are getting out of osteopenia and out of osteoporosis, increasing muscle mass, endurance. People are having an amazing, especially I am loving it. I'm loving the amount of energy I feel. I feel like I'm a 7-year-old again. I've tapped into this never-ending deep well of energy that kids, I've been kind of enviously looking at kids the last 7 years, wishing I had that abundant energy, and now I do. And that's from the patches, the phototherapy patches. So if you want to try that too, let's jump on a call together. I'd love to talk to you. Go to learntruehealth.com. Up in the menu, you can find where it says Work with Ashley James. Sign up for a free phone call with me to discuss the phototherapy patches. You can also email me, support@learntruehealth.com, or connect with me on Facebook. But best if we talked, if you jump on a phone call with me and we book a session to chat about it, so I can help you specifically pick out the right patches for you based on your health goals. Awesome. Well, thank you for listening, and watch out for next episode. Episode 500 is around the corner, and it's going to be filled with beautiful testimonials and stories of success from our listeners who have been impacted by the Learn to Health podcast. And if you have a testimonial and you'd love for me to share it with the listeners, any kind of positive impact that my podcast and my guests have had a difference in your life, please send it to me. There's still time to submit your testimonials. You can submit an audio testimonial, a video testimonial, which I'll just turn into an audio, or you can email me one and I'll read it. I'll read your testimonial. You can put it in the Facebook group, or you can email it to me, support@learntruehealth.com. I'd love to hear from you. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. And I just want you to know I love you so much, and I appreciate you so much. And I want you to feel your best. I want you to be as absolutely optimal, healthy as you can be. Every day, building up healthier and healthier and healthier. That's what I want for you. And for me too, right? So we're all building healthier bodies. We're not aging. We're not going downwards. We're going upwards. We are building ourselves up. At any age, we are building ourselves up. We have so much potential. Absolutely so much potential at any age to build healthier bodies. And that's what I want for you. And we're doing it together. So thank you for sharing these podcasts, my episodes, with those you care about, so we can help everyone we love to learn true health.